Hello everyone and welcome back, this time to StarCraft 2 with yet another build order guide video. Now this is something a bit unusual compared to my previous mini-series of build order guides where I did essentially my preferred build for each matchup, the Mirror, TvT, TvZ and TvP. This video instead is actually a response to a comment from one of my viewers where essentially they said, hey, I really don't like TvT as a matchup, I don't feel that confident with it, and really I just want a cheese build, if you have one, basically to just either win a game on the spot, on ladder, you know, just skipping the awkward mid-game where you can die to doom drops, to miscontrol, to not having vision on the map, and generally the whole thing being very knife's edge, kind of super aggressive, and extremely punishing if you misplay. He wanted to avoid all of that, and he was just like, hey, if you have a cheese build for this matchup, that would be fantastic. And I do feel like I've found the right thing for you. So without further ado, let me present 2 Proxy Barracks Reaper. Now, cheeses, when it comes to Terran, generally involve some kind of proxied building. Sometimes it's a bunker against Zerg most often, although sometimes against Protoss as well. But also, by and large, it involves proxied barracks for Reapers against Zerg for Marines, proxied factories for Widowmines against Protoss, for Cyclones against Protoss as well. Poor Protoss. And against Zerg, starports, kind of, although really it's just against Protoss. Now I think about it, it's mostly a proxied starport for Liberator, Harass, which is awkward for Protoss to deal with sometimes. So, yeah, in short, cheeses in Terran involve a proxied building. Now, this build actually involves barracks units, particularly the Reaper. As the Reaper benefits a ton from micro in the early game, it can out-damage a Marine if you control it well enough. You hit the grenades, you dodge shots, you dive in, you dive out. So good control is really rewarded when it comes to Reapers, and particularly large numbers of Reapers, which is what this build will attempt to accomplish with the 2 proxied barracks. And if you're unsure what proxied means, it means building a structure, be it a production building like a barracks or a bunker, say, out across the map so that it has closer distance or closer proximity to the opponent's base. And this gives you the advantage of the positioning and also the decreased travel time of produced units from that building, as naturally they don't have to travel as far to get close to your opponent and start attacking them. That's what makes these proxied buildings so aggressive in nature. It gives you an earlier attack time and timing for your aggression. So, in-game, let's see what the build is then. So as soon as the game starts, and you make your SCV to make your initial supply depot, grab one of your first SCVs that you start the game with and just send it to your proxy location. On Abyssal Reef, I've chosen here, but basically choose somewhere that's out of the way of a standard scouting path for your opponent, but which is close enough to the opponent's base to give you an advantage for your Reapers. And you start your supply depot, naturally, because you need to have a supply depot up to make any more units. Very standard stuff, if you've played any other game of StarCraft. But because this is a 2 proxy barracks build, we will need 2 SCVs. So, how I time out this second SCV is I wait for a worker, an SCV, to do 2 or 3 mining trips, backwards, forwards, backwards, forwards, backwards, forwards, and then send it out across the map to the proxy location that we've chosen, which is, as mentioned here. The reason you split them up is because A, you won't be able to afford to make 2 barracks at the same time, so there's no reason for 2 SCVs to be there at the initial timing. You only need 1 SCV for the initial barracks. And B, I think I said A, so B, it would look really suspicious if your opponent somehow scouted 2 SCVs going across the map at the same time. They would see 2 SCVs and immediately think, hang on, you only need 1 SCV to scout. So what's the second one doing? And that will set off alarm bells. They'll be thinking, hey, you're going to proxy something, oh, I've got to play defensive, and that ruins your chances of doing damage. So, that's the reasoning behind that. I'm glad we covered it. So basically at this point, one thing that is quite important is freezing SCV production as soon as you hit 15 supply, as you need those minerals, because this is an aggressive build, it's a cheese build, categorically, because you're proxying, you want to do damage. You don't need the SCVs as much as you need the buildings to be on time and as early as they can be. So what you want is the barracks to be going down as soon as the supply depot finishes, naturally. So no more SCVs from this point on for the moment, and this means that you have the minerals to go immediately barracks down. And as soon as you make that barracks, you get your first gas. And you'll see that this is the order we go in. We go barracks gas, and then barracks gas again, because it's 2 barracks proxied. So we've made our barracks, we've got our first gas going down, then our second SCV arrives, and as soon as it ticks over onto 150 minerals, we go, boom, second barracks down as well. And one thing I will mention is, whilst you're at this point in the game and not much is happening, select your constructing SCVs, these 2 building the barracks, and say, hey, shift queue them to go back to mining once they're done. This means you don't have to worry about them, it saves you ever thinking about them again in this game, and it saves all of that brain power that you have, assuming you have any, for the multitasking of good Reaper control, good Reaper micro, alongside good macro control at home, which is super important. So at this point, you've gone barracks, gas, barracks. Naturally, you go for your second gas now. And at this point, you can actually make a single SCV at this point, because you do want Orbital Command. This isn't a super aggressive build. You're not completely foregoing macro and production. You do want to be transitioning at some point, and in many games you will have to transition. So you make 1 SCV because naturally you have no barracks completed yet. You can't physically make an Orbital Command yet. Not that you can even afford to with how the minerals count up. So you make 1 SCV once you've gone barracks, gas, and then after your first Reaper is in production, you get to make your Orbital Command Center. And I will mention, you do want to be maxing out on these gases once they're done, as you do need the gas for A, continuous Reapers, and B, the transition into factory and starport, which happens later. So, we will be seeing the Reaper start more or less now. There we go, a little late there. Try and get your builds as sharp as possible. When they're aggressive, you want them to hit as soon as possible, which means as soon as something is done, boom, start producing. So there we go, we've got that underway, and over here, we've got the Orbital Command Center underway as well. And also, whilst this happens, just make a couple of supply depots, as and when you have the minerals. I personally prefer to finish off the wall with supply depots. It makes you a bit safer against marine-based stuff and cyclone-based stuff. Buys you a bit of time, so as soon as the orbital is done, call down a mule as normal, and from this point on, you have the minerals to go continuous SCV production. That's a-okay fine. You only froze production on SCVs earlier because you needed the barracks down on time and the gases down on time. So now, what you do is make between 5 and 6 Reapers. The only time you would make more than this is if you feel like your opponent is severely mismanaging, mismicroing their defense, and you think that you can just kill them and finish the game just there and then with Reapers. That's fair enough. So, with a couple of Reapers, go into your opponent's base, and this is where good Reaper control becomes super important. And I will mention, before we get on to what constitutes good Reaper control, as soon as you have the gas and the resources whilst going continuous Reaper production, slap down that factory, and as soon as you have the gas, once it's done, make a cyclone and then make a starport. And this basically allows you to continue your tech path at home whilst also doing damage across the map. It's pretty important for those games where you end up needing to transition into a fairly normal game after the Reaper aggression. Okay, so what you want to hear though is how you control Reapers well. And essentially it comes down to try to avoid A-moving with them, as unless you have massive numbers of Reapers, A-moving Reapers won't end up in any kills. So if we go onto the Units Lost tab, you can see that that initial dive-in did no actual permanent damage. I bruised a bunch of SCVs, I think I bruised a single Marine. There he is. Poor guy. But other than that, I didn't actually kill anything. So instead of A-moving, what do you want to be doing? Well, you want to be focus firing. In the same way that with a Banshee, you want to go right-click, shift, right-click, 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 so that it basically is told to kill this guy, then kill this guy, instead of, hey, attack anything near you, and possibly not kill anything. You want to be doing that with your Reapers. So there we go, that's 1 kill just by focus firing, 2 kills, 3 kills. Focus firing is pretty good, turns out. 4 kills, I've lost nothing yet. 5 kills, 6 kills. Naturally, this is against the AI, so against a human opponent, your mileage may vary, but yeah. I mean, to be fair, against a human opponent, depending on your league, it might actually respond less well than the AI actually is. But there we go, 11 kills, 1 Reaper lost, 12 kills. If you get 12 SCV kills, you've probably won the game. I'm just saying, you've probably just won the game. Assuming you've lost just not that many Reapers, you've probably just won the game there and then. But in case you don't, in those instances where you don't murder your opponent horrifically with just your Reapers, this is where the multitasking is important in terms of both microing Reapers and getting kills, if you can, and macroing well at home. SCV production, getting a factory down and getting a Cyclone out as soon as it's done, getting a Starpot down as soon as you can afford to get a Viking out for defense. And as you can see here, as soon as you've made those 5 to 6 Reapers, just lift off your barracks and send them back home, plant them down, as unless you think you can just finish the game with your Reapers, and by making more Reapers, what's more important than making more Reapers and finding out that, hey, Reapers don't match well against a Cyclone, is sending your barracks back and getting now into Marine production, getting Stim Tech, getting combat shields after Stim, getting a reactor down for reactored Marine production. That is so much more important for a successful transition than going more Reapers, more Reapers. But as mentioned, if you feel you can kill the opponent with Reapers, then by all means, it's a judgment call for you to make. And that SCV needs to get back to work. Damn it, SCV. But yeah, there we go. Naturally, with your remaining Reapers, get damage done where you can. But at this point, you're focusing on the transition and successfully moving on from aggression into 2-base economy. As if you've done any damage and lost no Reapers, then you are, chances are, economically ahead over your opponent. So you can go into a fast 2nd base. You're going to be safe because you made a Cyclone and you made a Viking. So you've got air control, you've got a nice ground tanky unit, and of course, you've got your surviving Reapers. Emphasis on the word surviving. If you lose your Reapers, you are in a very bad position, so try and avoid that, if you can. And that is basically the build. From this point on, you get Stim, you get a reactor, you get a tech lab after either 2 or 3 Cyclones, that's cool. And yeah, you're probably economically ahead if you microed well enough to get kills. So that is the build. It's aggressive. It really punishes Reaper fast expand openings in Terran versus Terran, which are bad openings in general because they're so greedy. But regardless, it punishes that. It can get you easy wins if your opponent mismicros their SCVs or their fighting units, or as mentioned, if they go for something greedy like a Reaper fast expand. And it also has the potential to transition with your factory on time, with your starport on time. you can get your tech up, you can get your second base up, and it's not super all-in unless you choose it to be. Unless you go for just lots of Reapers and don't send your barracks back, this build is perfectly fine transitioning. So yeah, hopefully you found this interesting. I chose this build because it actually encourages a lot of good skills in Terran players if you play it well. It encourages good unit control with Reapers, actually focus firing instead of just dumbly A-moving, I guess I would call it, which is fantastic, as Reapers are a very powerful unit in the right hands. And it also encourages just fast movement across the map and fast just actions, just APM in general, as you will be required to go from Reaper control, focus firing, back home, oh god, factory down, back to Reapers, don't lose any Reapers, back to home, make a starport, make a cyclone, you know, all that good stuff. So it teaches a lot of valuable skills and is quite aggressive. So hopefully this was what you were looking for, and everyone else who's watching this, hopefully it was educational and or informative. So as always, thank you for watching. I will be including a rough build order in the description below, so check that out if you find the video a bit too lengthy, which I've got to be honest, I do have the fault of being a bit wordy sometimes, but yeah, that is the build. 2 Proxy racks Reaper into sometimes a transition. As always guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!